Hello, everyone. Welcome. We'll give it 2 more minutes for people to join. Hola a todos, bienvenidos. Vamos a comenzar en 2 minutos. Gracias. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's monthly online picket action for Hands Off Venezuela, No to Sanctions and No to Blockade on Venezuela. My name is Allison Bodine. I'm your host for today. I am the coordinator of Fire This Time Movement for Social Justice Venezuela Solidarity Campaign and broadcasting tonight's picket from the unceded, stolen traditional territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, and Squamish Coast Salish nations here in Vancouver, British Columbia. Today's picket is the 38th consecutive monthly action where we've united our voices demanding an end to the criminal U.S. sanctions and blockade against Venezuela and an end to U.S.-led imperialist intervention in Venezuela. This action is organized by Fire This Time Movement for Social Justice, Venezuela Solidarity Campaign, the Venezuela Peace Committee in Winnipeg, Canada, and Just Peace Advocates, also here in Canada, with the support of Venezuela Solidarity organizations and individuals all across Canada and the United States. We have an excellent program of speakers today to give us the information to arm ourselves in this continued struggle in defense of Venezuela's sovereignty and self-determination, with reports direct on the ground about what is happening in Venezuela today and the impact of criminal U.S. policy in Venezuela. I also want to start today by saying that today is important because we are in the month of April. In the month of April, the people of Venezuela each year celebrate the fact that they overturned a U.S.-sponsored coup against President Hugo Chavez, who was the leader of the Bolivarian revolutionary process in Venezuela, in only 2 days, with the mass support of the people in the year of 2002. So we are here celebrating the month of April with the people of Venezuela, who proudly say every April 11th has its 13th, because the coup happened on April 11th and Chavez was returned to power by the people of Venezuela by the 13th. But this same month, U.S. President Biden announced that it would not be renewing a temporary license granted to some U.S. companies to trade with Venezuela's state-owned oil and gas sector. So we've seen this month an increase again, or coming increase, in the U.S. sanctions against Venezuela. These oil and gas sanctions, which were temporarily lifted, are only part of the cruel U.S. sanctions and blockade on Venezuela, which is also supported by governments such as those here in Canada, the European Union. But I think their reimposition is really an attempt to bring increasing hardship to the people of Venezuela, especially as they prepare for their election of the presidential election in July of 2024, so just a few months away. The U.S. blockade and sanctions against Venezuela are a form of collective punishment against the people of Venezuela, who are denied access to food, medicines, basic necessities because of criminal U.S. policy. But despite this, the people of Venezuela continue to defend their rights to sovereignty and self-determination against US-led attacks and intervention in their internal affairs. So this month, we have, as I mentioned, a really great program, and I welcome all of you. I thank you for taking time out of what is likely a good, nice, early spring evening, and also recognizing that many of us are engaged in other struggles in support of sovereignty and self-determination and the struggle against brutality and Israeli occupation in Palestine. But it's important that we continue our united organizing for Venezuela, and I welcome you and thank you for spending time with us this evening or afternoon. We'll hear from organizers and activists who know firsthand the horrible impacts of the US-imposed blockade and sanctions on Venezuela, especially tonight through the experience of Venezuelan migrants. So again, welcome all, and we'll go ahead and get started with our program. Like the other monthly Picket actions, we'll begin with a panel of speakers. Then we will move to greetings from people across Canada who have joined tonight, and then we'll join together and unite our voices by chanting and taking a group photo. To start us off with our panel, we have a speaker who joined us actually, interestingly enough, about a year ago. So really grateful to have her once again, and that is Ana Gabriela Salazar, who is a sociologist from the Central University of Venezuela and a researcher at the International Observatory of Migration and Human Rights, ARGOS. She's also a research coordinator at SURES, which is a Venezuelan human rights organization. Both of those organizations, if you've had the opportunity to go to Venezuela and delegations, you likely met with some of their organizers and researchers. And we're really grateful to have Anna's expertise tonight and perspective in our ongoing struggle in defense of Venezuela. So Anna, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Hola a todos y a todas. Para mí es un honor poder compartir nuevamente con ustedes este día hablando de los migrantes y la migración. Y quisiera felicitarlos por esta nueva acción mensual que han desarrollado consecutivamente por 38 meses. Es alentador saber que hay gente comprometida alrededor del mundo con la lucha del pueblo venezolano.
With the struggle of the Venezuelan people, and that you are against imperialism, colonialism, and that you raise the flags of defense for the most oppressed and repressed and invisibilized peoples of the world. So greetings to all of you. I'm here in Caracas, Venezuela. This is where I live and where I work. And I would like to say first, I would like to start my presentation today by saying that maybe it's something that is very obvious, but many people seem to forget it, which is that the rights of migrants, that migrants are people, and therefore they have the same human rights as any other people and as any other nationals. So we are here discussing Venezuelan migration. And why is that? Because this year marks the 10th anniversary. By the end of this year, on December, it marks the 10th anniversary of the act that was enacted by the Congress of the United States that in December 2014 established the roadmap for the Obama's law in relation with the United States foreign measures. And that was the starting point of this journey that has had a direct relationship with the flows of people that have migrated from Venezuela to other parts of the world, to the United States, to other countries of the region of the American continent, and to Europe mainly. So we noticed that next year in March, the Obama decree or the Obama Act has been will celebrate its 10th anniversary. It has been extended by the following administrations, by Trump and by Biden as well. So since 2024 is an election year, not only in Venezuela, where we will be electing our next president, well, it's also an electoral year for the United States. So we see that there has been an increase in hate speech, in hate narrative, in seeing migration as the core of the media and political agenda, which clearly has a negative impact on migrants. So I very much look forward to listen to YHAMIR, who works directly with Venezuelan migrants in New York. So with the start of this sanctions program, we saw an unprecedented process in the history of Venezuela, because we had always welcomed migrants from Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru, but now we see a process that is the opposite. We see a large amounts of Venezuelans leaving, fleeing our country, seeking better life conditions and seeking means of survival, since this sanctions program that was imposed by Washington and by other countries, the European Union and the United Kingdom especially, these affect income directly for the state of Venezuela. The social policies program was based on this income, this program that had resulted in an increase in health, education, housing degrees and levels that we had reached thanks to our participatory democracy scheme ever since Commander Hugo Chavez came to power. So migration, and especially Venezuelan migrants, is at the core of media coverage, and we see very concerning situations. We have observed very concerning situations throughout these years, which have been on the rise whenever there have been more tension, whenever there has been more tension, such as during political campaigns. So we see a tendency to the imposition of punitive policies in relation to migration and criminalization of migrants, and smear campaigns in relation to some criminal acts that some migrants commit. But when you study this and when you see the rate, the amount of people and the amount of migrants in the United States or in New York, for example, and you compare that to the number of crimes that have been committed by migrants, well, the number is very, very small. So this is something that we have to demystify, because politicians and people working in the media create narratives that criminalize or stigmatize migrants by calling them criminals or accusing them of things that do not have any real solid arguments. Then, on another hand, we should highlight that the relationship between Venezuela and the United States in terms of migration has been constant, but with different stages. Ever since Venezuela developed its oil industry in the 20s, in the 1920s, the trade relationship between these two countries started developing, and there have been different waves of migrants. At first, this was related to the oil industry, which nowadays has been severely affected by the sanctions imposed by the United States. We have seen a complete pillaging of the resources of the Venezuelan people and the Venezuelan state. And then during the 70s, thanks to a grant program, the United States received or welcomed many, many migrants with who were very much trained because they were going to do PhDs or high-level degrees to the United States. But then when there was this attempted coup against Hugo Chavez, on the basis of this polarization that we had in Venezuela, there was another group of people that decided to migrate due to political motives. So this migration that had started around 2015 is an economic migration. It's directly related to the economic and social crisis that the sanctions have produced against Venezuela.
Proceso de ralentización o disminución.
We've seen a reduction or a setback of those social indicators in health, food, housing, life quality or life standards in general. And it has created this massive exit of Venezuelan people to other countries. Nonetheless, since 2018, due to discriminatory situations and the really bad living conditions for Venezuelan migrants abroad, there is a gradual process of people returning to our country. And until not very long ago, the international bodies like ACNUR, for example, wanted to hide the situation. But right now, they acknowledge that there is a process of return, of going back, that has been gradual, but they're expecting it to grow. And that's why the government of Venezuela created a plan called Vuelta a la Patria, come back to your country, that has been criminalized, and they have created a lot of distortions about it that are not real. The plan, come back to your country, facilitates the return, the volunteer return of Venezuelan migrants to our country. And this is done through the embassies. Nonetheless, due to the political economic restrictions and the blockade against Venezuela, this plan has been more difficult to take to carry on. Relationships diplomatic relationships were broken between the United States and Venezuela after the Guaido situation, because they were recognizing this person as an authority in our country, and that created even more difficulties and the cooperation between countries to facilitate the flights for people that were coming back to the country. And on the other hand, the sanctions, economic sanctions, have affected not only the life conditions of the migrants, but not only the processes of discrimination of the Venezuelan people abroad, but they have also hurt the efforts of the Venezuelan government to bring back their migrants to the country. Therefore, the state airline that does these flights to bring people back, it's prohibited. The landing is prohibited, for example, or they cannot receive the fuel they need. And so many times these flights have a lot of difficulties to carry on this program. This program is a very good practice in terms of cooperation and in terms of establishing a program so that migrants can come back to our country. Those who want to come back can do it safely, voluntarily, and for free. I don't know if I'm talking too much. I'm being very long in my speech. No, that's fine. Okay. Am I okay? How many minutes do I have left? Can I say something else?
Sí, claro, si quieres 5
Yes,
más o menos.
please go ahead. You have more 5 more minutes if you want. Okay. Therefore, to finish, there are many things that we've seen in the researches and the studies and investigations, and I wanted to emphasize the fact that there used to be flexibilization policy for the migrants, but when the diplomatic relationships are broken and the embassy is closed and people cannot get the visas for the United States, we started seeing during the pandemic and also post-pandemic bigger fluxes of people that are moving by land, to the border of the United States. And we've seen that there are people that are leaving from Venezuela, but there are other people that are secondary migrants, which means that they probably live or have lived in region countries like Colombia, Chile, Argentina, Peru, or Ecuador, and they decide to start another migrant process to the United States, going through the entire Central America until Mexico in order to reach the United States border. So this is some data that we can look into, and of course, here the main role is on YHAMIR, who is working directly with these migrants in New York. But during all these years, we've been able to talk and do research with many migrants that came back to Venezuela. And the situation for them is really hard due to discrimination and very bad conditions for work and their living conditions, their lack of education and the lack of guarantees and rights that we should all have. That's why I started my speech talking about this migrants being the people that have the same rights, because these rights are violated for many, many people, many migrants. So that's all for me tonight. Thank you so much. And I'm here to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Ana Gabriela Salazar, for that context. And I think something very important you brought up regarding Obama's declaration that Venezuela was an extraordinary threat to the national security of the United States. That was really what increased and enabled Congress and the US administration to increase their pressure campaign of sanctions against Venezuela. We can think about it now and understand a country, you know, just over 30 million people, many of thousands of miles away. How is that an extraordinary threat to the national security of the United States? And it sounds ridiculous, but it's had a very significant impact on the relationship between the US and Venezuela, and the ability of the US to really intervene in Venezuela's internal affairs and try and bring about an economic crisis in Venezuela, to convince people in Venezuela to leave the country, to overthrow their democratically elected government. And I think that's very significant what you raised. And also you raised another important demand that I think needs to be part of our demands when we talk about sanctions and blockades. We also need to demand a regularization, a normalization of relations between the United States and Venezuela, which is completely broken apart. Of course, the US's policy is in shambles because they still support the so-called president of Venezuela, Juan Guaido, as does the government of Canada. But this is not a basis to have any sort of regular relations which could, or normalized relations which could regularize immigration and migration from Venezuela to the United States. The same policy was played out and continues to play out with Cuba, where the US government would rather see people risk their lives to travel to the US to flee Cuba rather than immigrating normally to the United States. And it's the US government that doesn't grant visas to Cuban immigrants. And I think that is also what they are trying to apply to Venezuela. So thank you for that perspective. And if anyone has questions, please put them in the chat or the Q&A box. I think we'll have time to get to them. So as Anna mentioned, we do have YHAMIR CHABUR here with us, who is joining from New York City, who has been working, you know, among other work, with Venezuelan migrants. He is a Colombian American, born and raised in Queens in New York City. He works as a tenant organizer and is a political analyst with the Pan-Latin Americanist group, the Troika Kollective. YHAMIR has done delegation and solidarity work in Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, and is currently preparing to go on another solidarity trip this summer to his native land of Colombia with the Alliance for Global Justice, where he will take part in a project to build a school in the area of La Guajira, the North Caribbean part of Colombia, which borders Venezuela. YHAMIR today will present a case study on the migration of Venezuela to the USA in connection to the illegal sanctions imposed by the US and the treatment of Venezuelan migrants in New York City. Thank you, YHAMIR. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Allison. Thank you for inviting me on this online picket. Thanks again to la compañera Ana, all the way from Caracas, the lovely, heroic Caracas, the birthplace of the liberator, Simón Bolívar. Yes, it is great to join y'all. Basically, my presentation might not be as long as Ana, but I'm gonna get to the point of the Venezuelan migrants here in the US, the experience, and yeah, just basically, I'm going to start with saying that, wait, sorry, my computer was showing me something right now. Yeah, I'm basically going to say that since Biden, in the government of Biden, since they pushed Title 42, which was a policy to push for asylum seekers coming from Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, and Haiti, you saw an influx of a lot of the migrants coming from those countries, especially Venezuela. And I feel like that has to do a lot with the United States and their imperialist policies to try to weaponize migration against a government that they're trying to overthrow. Like when we think about the history of this, it's kind of interesting because first off, United States, like Canada, it's stolen land. This is what we're on. We're on occupied Turtle Island, and it's like they have this border. And basically like they allow migrants, they'll close the border to migrants that they don't want to allow in, and they'll open the border for migrants that they do want to allow in, like for certain geopolitical reasonings, like for example, like in the 80s with the Marielito boat lift, allowing the Cubans to come into the US and get residency in order to have a lobby in Washington to build up their right-wing lobby against the Cuban Revolution and enforce more the criminal blockade on Cuba. This is the same tactic they're doing right now with Venezuela. With each Venezuelan that crosses the border without them knowing, they're coming in here and they're adding on to the list of like the government of Biden adding on to the sanctions. And it's like a revolving door. It's like you're complaining about these people coming in, yet you don't want to solve the problem, which are the sanctions. And these are illegal, unilateral, coercive measures. We also have to use that term because sanctions is basically using the language of like people are getting punished. Venezuelans are not getting punished. It's that their crime is because they've wanted to take a different route with their country and their economic system and have a political project for their nation state. So you have the wave of migrants coming to the U.S. and then I would say there's in the United States right now under Biden, there's a wave of like governors, and I want to get towards the governor of Florida. But there's been a wave of governors who are against Biden, pro-Trump, and one governor right there is Ron DeSantis, very far-right, fascistic governor, joining alliance with the governor of Texas to not want to accept none of these migrants into their states, especially in Florida. When you go to South Florida, Miami, there's a big Venezuelan population. When you go to like area like Weston or in Fort Lauderdale or Doral in Miami, Ron DeSantis did not want to absorb them and had them shipped to like the north, to the more democratic cities, sanctuary cities, and then that's how we have Venezuelans arriving to my city, my lovely city of New York City, where we're a big melting pot. We love to accept migrants. But the thing is, we're a sanctuary city. So regardless of like, I would say the politics of our mayor, Eric Adams, who's a Democrat, but also far right. He's, very pro-cop, pro-real estate mayor, has to absorb these migrants due to New York City being a sanctuary city. So we've had since 2022, I think the number is about 136,000 Venezuelan migrants. They're the most that have migrated to New York recently in comparison to the other migrants. Like we have migrants coming from Colombia, we have migrants coming from Ecuador, we have migrants coming from Haiti, we have migrants even coming from Africa. Like there's folks from the Congo, from Senegal that are coming as well. They're not being counted for, but they are coming as well. But the most have been Venezuelans, and they have been put into shelters. Over, I believe the number is like 56,000 in Manhattan and over 44,000 in my native borough of Queens. Many of them have come and like they come with different like Anna touched upon that some of them are coming from Venezuela, straight from Venezuela, but some of them are second type of immigrant, like saying that they're not just they have not come directly from Venezuela. They come from the neighboring countries of Colombia or Peru or Chile and have lived there for a couple of years and utilize these countries to jump into the US or to Mexico to cross the border. I would say that there's been, they formed a little bit of an enclave. Like I've seen in the New York Times how now the Venezuelan migrants are now creating this community, this little Caracas, in a community of this area in New York City called Jackson Heights, which is historically a predominantly Colombian neighborhood, Ecuadorian neighborhood, Peruvian neighborhood. Now Venezuelans are coming, and usually folks when they migrate and like in New York City, they tend to be like by their neighboring countries. I think it's due to like cultural like comparisons, or also like there's also somebody of like Anna said before too, Venezuela has always been a country that have accepted immigrants from all over the continent, from all over the world, but from all over the continent. So Venezuelans also are not like 100% Venezuelans. They're probably Venezuelans who are of Colombian descent, Venezuelans who are Ecuadorian descent, Venezuelans who are Peruvian descent. So there's a little bit of a tie there and connection. But as from what I've seen, because I think we also have this double standard when it comes to migration. Like folks want to accept the migrants, want to feel bad, want to talk about, oh, it's some Maduro regime that he just, that one report that they try to say is that he did what Castro did and released all the prisoners out of Venezuela, and that's why we have this gang called El Tren de Aragua, the Train of Aragua. That's a very popular gang out in Venezuela. Now they're flooding New York City, and it becomes like a double standard of feeling bad and then feeling this boogeyman like scenario. And also like they also try to add on to that they're trying to leech off the system, you know, all that they're getting all the free stuff and the hotels, and it's all jargon because it all like derives from the real social problems that we have in New York City. And this is also me talking as a tenant organizer, as a housing organizer, that we're living in a city like New York City, one of the wealthiest cities in the world, where we have an increase of 75% of people who are homeless. It's hard to find affordable housing. We have very greedy landlords. We have companies buying up like prime real estate, apartments with rental laws. So, you know, it's like they want to derive the problem when it comes to these migrants. Like, oh, like we're having this housing problem, but they want to, now they find a boogeyman, like a scapegoat, and they try to scapegoat the Venezuelan migrants. That has been kind of a media war, a propaganda war, calling them Biden's illegals. That's one term they utilize. There was also a case by 42nd Street. Maybe a lot of people are very familiar with 42nd Street because of the movies and stuff, where a cop violently attacked a family, like a Venezuelan family, but it was a group, but it was like a family, and he grabbed up like the guy, and then all the other migrants jumped in and beat up the cop, but they only show that part of the video. And then the next segment of the video showed how the cop was at fault for touching the Venezuelan migrant. But anyways, I would say too, as far as like the bad propaganda the Venezuelan migrants get, I also defend the fact that, you know, they're coming from a bad situation, which is, you know, their country being under economic siege, economic strangulation. And most folks, as I've seen, you know, like when I was talking about this formation of this community of little Caracas, you know, that's forming, it's an area where you start seeing Venezuelans with their businesses, you know, selling their arepas, their cachapas, their pepitos, you know, and I you know, I tell myself, you know, like, regardless of their political, like their political leaning, because I feel like some folks, of course, they're like furious with what's going on in Venezuela, and they want to blame the government, and not want to acknowledge the sanctions, probably. Some folks are very like in the middle. I try not to get into a conversation like that. I try to be like, if I'm somebody who is in solidarity with Venezuela and I want to fight against the illegal unilateral coercive measures, of course, one part of the solidarity is to go to to support migrants in the streets and support them with their businesses, and also defend them every time folks want to attack them, because the reality is, and it's crazy because I always run into these arguments with other Latin American migrants that want to attack Venezuelans, but we're all a migrant community. We all come with our culture. We all have to be in solidarity with each other. We all have to have unity. And I just would say that it's we also have to tap into history, just the way Anna does. This country also, like, it has a history of, I would say, well, I would say, like, Venezuela, like, when we tap into like Latin American history, Cubans usually do this a lot. I like what, like, the Cubans, like the revolutionary Cubans with the revolutionary diaspora, likes to tap into, like, a figure like Jose Marti. Jose Marti, he was an apostle of the Cuban Revolution, lived in New York City for over 14 years, was a founder of a lot of Latino fraternities here. And always thought about, his lovely Cuba. He lived in New York, but his eyes and heart was in his lovely Cuba. And I would say the same thing when raising a figure like Simón Bolívar or Francisco de Miranda, that they also lived in the United States. Like, you had Bolívar that lived in West Virginia, which you have a town named after him. This is during his time of living in the U.S., during a moment where he admired the American Revolution and them overthrowing and being successful against the British Empire. And then you also have Francisco de Miranda from Florida, that fought alongside the independence, for the independence of the U.S. against the British in the lands of Florida. But that's many other things that I feel is very important when raising, when changing the dialogue, the framing of migration, and when it comes to Venezuelan migrants. And I would also say too, like, now I always tell Venezuelan migrants when we're in the streets, it's just, now we've accomplished the dream of the Father Bolivar. Now we're all a diaspora community of Colombians, Ecuadorians, Venezuelans. Now we're the Gran Colombia, the Great Colombia here in New York. But yes, I think the important part is just to have the unity amongst the migrants. Also raise the problem is due to these sanctions, and yeah, show solidarity. I would end with saying, I remember there was like a family, a Venezuelan family, and I remember, like, I gave them like a little bit of something for them bad. And, I told them, who taught me how to be like this, like in solidarity, solidario. And they started smiling because they understood what I was going to say. And I was going to say Commander Chavez, So, yes. Yeah, so that's basically my my presentation. I don't know if William's on yet, but yeah, Oh, also one last thing. I remember, Anna also spoke about this too. That consulate, I remember when we had the consulate, and I say we, even though, like, I'm like Colombian American, but I feel also a little bit. I also feel Venezuelan as well. But we, the consulate in New York City, because it's not even just like a Venezuelan or Colombian thing. It's a people internationalist thing, and like the social movements in New York City. I remember when the consulate was under control of the legitimate government, which is the Maduro government, the Bolivarian government. I remember being invited there for events. It was just beautiful being in a space like that, learning. Just feeling connected to like my culture, history, also learning about Venezuela, and being a space for like the internationalists and working class and anti-imperialists. To see that was taken away due to this clownish I'm thinking about it in Spanish. They say payasada, you know, clownish policy of recognizing an illegitimate president of Juan Guaido. And that, like, why I have to mention that is because that hurts also the migrant population that are here in the U.S. That the Venezuelan government, which is the legitimate government, cannot attend to their migrant population like other populations, like the Mexican population here has a connection with their government, or the Colombian population, or the Brazilian, or from other country. But Venezuelan migrants, due to this this policy, they have no like connection with their government, and that's, you know, unfortunate, because they have a program in Venezuela called Mission to Return to the Homeland, Misión Vuelta a la Patria, that helps Venezuelan migrants come back for free, repatriate back to Venezuela. But due to this also bad, horrible policy, that we also have to like push, not just, you know, lifting of the sanctions or hands off Venezuela, but to respect Venezuela, to have this government of Biden recognize this is the legitimate government of Venezuela. You don't have to be in agreement with somebody's home, but you have to respect that this is their household and this is how they want to build themselves up. So this is all sovereignty and love and respect. But I guess, yeah, that's just about it. And yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you, YHAMIR, for joining us. You know, you've probably had a similar experience, but a friend of mine who also lives in New York City said she went out onto the street wearing a Chavez t-shirt, and someone saw her and said, "Oh yeah, like, are you Venezuelan?" And she said, "No, but I'm Bolivarian." And she saw a friendly reaction to him, or to her expression, and so she decided to say, "I'm Bolivarian and Chavista, I support Venezuela." And he went on to explain, you know, that he hadn't really wanted to leave Venezuela, that he felt forced to leave Venezuela due to the economic situation, but that he would keep defending Venezuela. You know, he said that the sanctions had an impact to people he knew, and himself, you know, he watched them go from a position of defending Venezuelan sovereignty and right to choose their own government to really taking the position of the US government and believing that it was the fault of the US government. And apparently he said something like, "They can't defeat our will. We migrate, but we never stop being the children of Chavez and Bolivar." So, you know, I think hopefully in the Venezuela Solidarity Movement, we can approach Venezuelan migrants and convince them to work with us when they're here in North America. And part of that will come through supporting their struggles as migrants for housing and healthcare and education and all of the racism that they will face, you know, whether it's in the United States or Canada or places that they migrate to. So thanks for sharing your firsthand experiences and for the work you do.
Oh,
go ahead.
I just wanted to share too, I forgot. Also in my barbershop, I have a barbershop I've gone to for like past like 15 years, since I was a young chamo, like they call themselves in Venezuela, chamos. My barbershop has now been filled with a lot of Venezuelan migrants, you know, and they love, like, I don't try to really get into politics, but they know like my political leaning. And like they call me, I love when I go in there, and they love to call me Petro, you know, for the Colombian president. And it's like, it's always a good time. But I remember Venezuelans usually, because Venezuelans are Caribbean people. You also have to know how to approach people, understand cultural context. They're very Caribbean, very funny people, very happy people, you know, and it's just like, oh, I always tell them, I always say it in Spanish, but like I always say, where does the son of Venezuela, where is the son, wait, oh, the son of Venezuela, where is it born? And you know, they know my response. It's a Essequibo like campaign, but
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, so William CAMACARO from the Alliance for Global Justice is still working on getting online. But Anna, there was a question here. The question is, Western media have always reported very dubious migration figures. What, in your opinion, is a reasonable estimate of the total number of Venezuelans who have immigrated since 2015?
Es una pregunta difícil.
Well, it's a very difficult question to answer. It's a complex question because there's several issues here. The government of Venezuela, as such, has never published official figures on the amount of people that have migrated. And on another hand, there are many people who have migrated via land, not only via planes, and they have also migrated to Trinity and Tobago and the Caribbean islands via water. So I cannot really give you an official figure, but also there are platforms organized by the former Lima group as part of the intern government and the legitimate government of Juan Guaido, who say that at the moment there are 8 million Venezuelans abroad that have emigrated outside their country. So this number, this figure, we think it's not real, that it's larger than the real number. They themselves recognize that there could be a double registry and that many people have returned. And I think that at this moment, we always ask in our research who has family abroad and who has family members or friends that have migrated and have returned, and everyone raises their hand. They say, me, this is my case. My sister, for example, my sister lived abroad and for 2 years and then she returned. So providing a figure, an exact figure is hard and it's complicated. We in ARGOS used the figures of the United Nations populations report, but for ever since 1.5 years, we saw that they had started using the figures of the IOM and the UNHCR. So, and this is the 8 million figure. So we have a report. This is in Spanish, but I can share it with you. And in this report, we show that there are various cases. This is a whole statistics report, and we could say that around 4 or 5 million people have migrated. This depends because many people have returned during the pandemic, for example, and migrants went through very precarious situations abroad, so they returned even though there was the borders were closed. So not all of them returned through official channels. But nevertheless, I will share the link to this study with you. And this is what we are always requesting from the Venezuelan state, for it to have public figures, because that would allow organizations which work with migrants and which research on this topic to have a better understanding and also to have a much more robust support for Venezuelans who are abroad and who are returning. I hope I was able to answer the question.
Yes, thank you, Anna. That's very helpful. Earlier I put in the chat the contact information for the main pages and social media for Sures and for Argos, but if you have the link available to the report, I think that would be very useful for folks who are thinking about, breaking through the media lies can be very difficult. And there's a lot of misinformation. And then also, as you said, issues are presented in a simple way, but they're actually very complex. Something that I know is very important when considering migration. And Venezuela is also Venezuela's shared border with Colombia, which has a very long history of people, and not just a few hundred people, but tens of thousands of people kind of moving back and forth. And I think that is also important to take into account, but you have to think more about it and understand in order to bring that into your analysis. So thank you very much. William hasn't quite been, oh, he might be connecting right now. Okay, he's connected on telephone, so we're going to try and find a quick picture. For folks who may not be familiar, the final panelist for today is William CAMACARO, and William is the founder of the Bolivarian Circle, which is an organization for Venezuela in New York City. It's called the Alberto Lovera Bolivarian Circle, and is now an organizer as well with the Alliance for Global Justice, as well as a senior research fellow at the Council on Hemispheric Affairs. So I'm going to see if William has a few words to share, and then during his presentation as well or following, I'm going to also share information about an important upcoming delegation to Venezuela from the Alliance for Global Justice. So let's see if we can get William here online. William, can you hear us?
Hello.
Hey, hola.
Yes, finally. Sorry for all the mess. It's being a little difficult to get connected. Thank you very much, Alison, for inviting me and to have me here. Yes, I just want, I don't know what to start saying, but and I don't know how, I think that almost you are done, but I just want to basically tell everybody that should, be alert with Venezuela in these days, to be watching the news and reading about Venezuela, because these days are extremely important, and everything gets extremely complicated usually when Venezuela is in election, especially presidential election. So Venezuela is coming July 28th, so we will have presidential elections, and it is important that everybody just check the news about Venezuela and be alert. I remember I have been traveling with delegations for a while to Venezuela, and always something happened, protests, all kind of rumors, some kind of statement from the State Department, and always they trying to mess with the electoral process in Venezuela. And this one is very critical because since that they are a little desperate, and President Maduro had the chance, a very clear chance to win this election, and that's something that made them feel very desperate. So we will also be in Venezuela for the election, taking a group of people, and whoever is interested to go, just check the website of the Alliance for Global Justice. We have all the information there, and also there are people that could be there as people serving the electoral process, but also people that want to be around. That is important. Walking around, meeting with people, and during the process, the electoral process in Venezuela is extremely important because those people that are walking on the street, checking the daily life of the Venezuelan are normal during an electoral process is very important because they can report what really is going on in the ground, in the street, and that's very important. Also, we have a letter in the website that which we are still trying to get more signatures. Letters where that we will be sending soon to this to the UN, and it's a very important letter because everybody knows, everybody that has been checking the news, President Maduro life has been in threat by different groups down there, and we can include United States in those groups. So, and it's very important to put the word out, to say that we don't want any kind of intervention, any kind of, anything to happen to President Maduro, and to really denounce whatever is going on. And also, lately, I invite you to check the news. Lately, for example, we have seen the new opposition leader that will be running against President Maduro, and it's extremely interesting to see how the guys is, you see his speeches, you will see that he's completely despotic man, is anti-women, is completely homophobic, is someone that hates Black indigenous people. You need to check his speeches, and you will see what I'm talking about. It's important to be informed because now they will portray him as someone that is open-minded, very cool. But the reality is like very similar to Bolsonaro and Donald Trump. So check the news and check those videos and check what he said and be informed about what's coming in Venezuela. And I don't know what else to say because I think that you are tied with the time already. I just jumping over because I really wanted to participate and I was in another meeting and then I had so many issues to be connected.
That's all right, William.
Oh.
That's excellent. I'll pull up the website for the Alliance for Global Justice to show people the information about the delegation. I also put in the chat the link to find out more information about the delegation, which is called a delegation to celebrate 22 years of sovereignty and popular power in Venezuela. And so I really encourage people to share that to anyone that's expressed interest in traveling to Venezuela and seeing it for themselves. It is a life-changing experience to travel to Venezuela and see what it means to be in a country where people are organizing against US imperialism, against sanctions and blockades, and on a, in a community level building popular power. So I really encourage people to go to that. And also the sign-on letter, please copy that link out of your chat, sign it right now today. It's to denounce assassination plots against President Maduro, and sign it today and share with others. William, we talked today mostly about the experience of Venezuelan immigrants and migrants and kind of the root causes of immigration and migration in the historical context, but also today. So I don't know if you have any comments to share about that. We have time, but otherwise,
okay.
I think that's great.
No, let me say a few things.
Sure.
Let me say a few things. Yes, there is a report written by Juan Gonzalez, the co-host of Democracy Now!, and that is extremely important to read. Basically, Juan Gonzalez says in his report that more than 450,000 Cubans had came in the last 2 years to United States. And he said, you don't know it because they have a place, they have an infrastructure, and they are received in Florida. But around in the last 2 years, and we're talking about on the last 2 years, he said more than 400,000 Venezuelans have arrived to the United States. And those 400,000 are all over, and you can see them and make, you know, a lot of noise, media. They occupy a lot of media because they are all over. And those 2 years also, more than 120,000 Nicaraguans have been arriving to the United States. And everything is consequence of the sanctions. That's Juan Gonzalez's conclusion. Thanks to the sanctions, all these people have been arriving to the United States. But also he said, and that's a report, that we never see so many Venezuelans in the history of the United States. It was very difficult to find Venezuelan people living in the United States. Only middle-class, rich people were living in New York. People with a lot of resources and money. Now you see people selling, you know, street sellers. You see people working in construction here in by hundreds. So that's consequence of the sanctions. We need to be aware that those people that are arriving is because the sanctions. And these immigrants, all these immigrants that are working, coming from Venezuela to live in the United States, are people that never thought to come to the United States. So hence, you know, I recommend you have to see what the 2020 was for Venezuela. There was no gas. There was no gas to cook outside of Caracas. People didn't have gas to cook. They have to use a firewood stove. No, that's the word. Alison, that's the word. No, stove. And then they have to use also. They didn't have gas to drive. So in Venezuela, thanks to the sanctions, people have been going through very difficult economy situation, a scarcity of almost everything, thanks to the USA sanctions, support by the right-wing people in Venezuela. That they don't suffer anything because they can travel anywhere. They have family in United States, in Europe, and they had a lot of resources, money. And those people that are requesting sanctions against Venezuela and Venezuelan people to overthrow Maduro, they are not really helping anyone with that. They really are creating a chaos in Venezuela. Yes, have been facing very difficult situations thanks to the USA sanctions. So if you see now a lot of Venezuelans outside in the street, it's because that the sanctions, the USA sanctions. I don't know what can I say. I really think that it's a very sad to see. Just a few days ago, I saw the young women with a child that probably was less than 1 year old, and basically was asking for money in the street, and a very young woman. So and she was saying, "Hey, I'm Venezuelan. I'm coming from Venezuela. Can you help me?" And I never, in the past, I have been living here for 28 years, 30 years. I don't know exactly. I think that 30 years, and I never, in the past, have been able to see a Venezuelan person begging in the street. That's what can I say. I think that we should fight the sanctions and the blockade, not only against Venezuela, but also against Cuba and Nicaragua.
Yeah, exactly, William. That's what I was thinking. I mean, seeing that, knowing Venezuela and knowing, you know, the Bolivarian revolutionary projects, and imagining what it's like for that young woman to have come to the U.S. And now is, you know, asking begging for food or assistance, like that is a call to action. I mean, we need to really work to build our united, consistent campaign against sanctions and blockades on Venezuela and against the other countries around the world that are under this criminal, genocidal, really, U.S. policy that is economic warfare, and that is economic coercive measures meant to convince people in countries to change their governments, overthrow their systems, and is a violation of their rights to self-determination. So I think that is our call to action, and why we organize these monthly online picket actions, and why we encourage people to go to Venezuela and to really join with us in building a stronger movement for Venezuela, for Venezuela's sovereignty and self-determination. And hopefully we can appeal to all people on those grounds to join with us, and many different communities, organizations, institutions. We have a lot of work to do. So I really appreciate you making time to come, and YHAMIR and Ana for helping arm us in this work. I'll quickly share the website of the Alliance for Global Justice here. It is in your chat, but also just to show you what it looks like, this is how you can join the delegation. It's taking place July 21st through 31st. The costs are there in US dollars. As people living in Canada, we have to recall that usually costs are in US dollars. And you can find an application and everything there. So I really encourage people to do that. And then on the right, you can see your Take Action to Defend Venezuela's Sovereignty sign-on that William also talked about. So that is all in the chat.
Sure. Just let me say something about the delegation.
Of course.
The people we have the possibility. So we also visit a small town of fishermen called Chuao. It's a beautiful town. I would say that they are completely sustainable. They produce a lot of food. And we will meet with women that are working as a fisherman. And I don't know if that's correct. If I should say fisherwoman, I don't know. It's correct. But also, these are the women in the town that are fishing, and that's their job. They go every day in the morning to fish, and basically they know everything about the fishing law and what the government has been doing since Chávez was in power to preserve the artisanal fishermen, to preserve the culture of the artisanal fishermen. So it's very important. I think that people will be impressed because it's something that a lot of people don't know. Also, we will meet with some peasant leaders. In Venezuela, more than 300 peasant leaders have been killed. Still, I just was reading that 2 days ago, a peasant leader from Guárico was killed, and his family has been receiving threats from some kind of paramilitaries in the region. So it's very important to meet with them, because for the first time Venezuela is producing a huge amount of food thanks to the sanctions. Venezuela is producing a lot of around 78% of the food that people are consuming now, and that's very important. And these people are attacking the peasant movement in Venezuela. So we will be visiting some peasant leaders that have been receiving threats from paramilitaries, but also some people that have been injured from those attacks. And it's very important to see what they are doing, how they are working the land, and also how they are defending themselves, organizing themselves to protect their communities.
Excellent. Thank you. Yes. Okay.
Okay.
So
Thank
you, William. We will go on to our next section. There are a few folks who are going to give us greetings today from across Canada, and then we can see if, of course, if any of our panelists have any closing remarks. But I'd like to invite Andrew Barry, who is here from Mobilization Against War and Occupation, MAWO, Vancouver, and Anti-War Coalition. Andrew, go ahead.
Thanks, Allison. I was listening to the words that William was speaking about the condition of the number of migrants who are now in the United States, coming from places like Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua. And it's a very angering situation that the United States has imposed on countries like Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua that are trying to make a change in the world for the better. As an anti-war organizer in a country like Canada, an imperialist country, it can be isolating at times to watch the government here go wage war across the world and seemingly being able to get away with it, for putting wars against people across Palestine, Iraq, Afghanistan, threatening wars in more countries, bombing and sanction a country like Yemen for 10 years now, and to see them continuously put sanctions and blockades against other countries like Venezuela, like Cuba, like North Korea, like Nicaragua. It's very, it can be very isolating to see all of this happening, but I think it's very important that we have in the world today, and that is a government like the President Nicolas Maduro and the government in Cuba that actually are sharing a voice that's similar to ours. What they're saying is that we are against the imperialist wars and occupations and blockades and sanctions that are happening across the world. And they have the world stage. And I think it's very inspiring that Venezuela and Cuba for so many years have been providing that voice for oppressed people across the world, speaking out in defense of the people of Palestine right now who are undergoing a genocide from the Israeli regime, which is completely backed by the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, and other imperialist countries. So to listen to what William was talking about, the conditions in Venezuela that is forcing so many people to leave and go to the United States is so angering, considering that Venezuela and Cuba are the countries that are giving a voice to the oppressed, and the United States is doing everything in its power to make life difficult in these countries. And to see that people are leaving and the United States is using it as propaganda against Venezuela and against Cuba, it makes such an anger, an inspiration that we must continue to go, we must continue to fight, and that we must continue to support and defend Cuba and Venezuela's right to exist as sovereign nations and as a voice for oppressed people across the world fighting for a better world. Lift the blockade and sanctions on Venezuela now. US and Canada, hands off Venezuela now.
Thank you, Andrew Barry, for joining us from Mobilization Against War and Occupation, MAWO. We also have with us Irma Sofia Nava Hernandez, who is here from CONACAP, which is a popular communication organization. They have a chapter in Mexico, and it was founded in Venezuela. Irma, very good to see you today.
Hola. Bueno, pues desde México lindo y querido.
Hello. So from Mexico, my beloved Mexico, a very big hug to all of you. It's a pleasure for me to hear William. I met him in Tijuana, and it's important to say that we are Bolivarian and Chavists. Those of us who have gone to Venezuela, it's our responsibility to tell the world how Venezuela is rising up. Despite the over 130 sanctions, they continue supporting themselves. They have just approved the referendum yesterday. So it's a responsibility for us to put down that media blockade that wants to meddle in the upcoming election process. So if there is a possibility, Alison, we will be there meeting each other and hugging each other to see that it's almost unspeakable, right? How, despite all those measures, Venezuela has one of the most trustworthy electoral systems. Nobody can say anything about this. These are electronic voting systems. There's biometric security involved. So this is what we have to tell the world. There is no dictatorship in Venezuela. quite the contrary. People rise up. There were different conditions in 2023, in 2024, and despite all of this, we see the people fighting. Here in Mexico, you know, this is the passing through road for all or many migrants. So we are collaborating with the embassy. We have Commander Ariel Cárdenas, who fought alongside Chavez, and they have they have sent many Venezuelans back to Venezuela. I have the embassy really close by, so I know about all these measures. And also, we have been speaking with our fellow Venezuelan migrants here, and this is what they say. Many times they have risked their lives, and when they come to Mexico, they are already exhausted and they want to come back. So, fortunately, these trips organized by the National Migration Institute and the Conviasa and this plan that you mentioned before, they are going back to their motherland. So it's an honor for me to be here and to say that I will continue to be committed with Venezuela. Venezuela is not alone, and we are proud because Bolivar is Mexican, and he was granted the Mexican citizenship 200 years ago. This is why I always say that Bolivar, you are Mexican and I am a Chavez. So thank you, and we will continue fighting. Thank you.
Gracias, Irma. Thank you, Irma, for being with us here today. Yes, we will see you in Venezuela next, I am sure of it. I wanted to also, we have with us here today Dean Ebert, who's here from the Hamilton Coalition to Stop the War. Would you like to say a few words?
Yes, I'll be brief. I'm here to show our solidarity with the people of Venezuela. And, you know, as we all know, there's, you know, multiple wars going on in the world. Most prevalent is the genocide that's happening in Palestine right now. And obviously, we're really concerned and doing our utmost to support them in their struggle for independence and to have their own state. But you know, there's two types of warfare. There's the bombs and the tanks and the bullets and all of that. But there's also economic warfare, and that's what's being practiced against the people of Venezuela. You know, it's not one armed forces from the UK or the US invading Venezuela, but economically, it can be just as disastrous for the country that's under embargo and under restrictions, trade restrictions, and it's just a different form of coercion. And so whether it's the bloodbath that's happening around the world, or whether it's economic exploitation and usurpation of basic human rights that are the purview of the citizens of that country, we're against that as well. It's just a different form. It's an economic war rather than a guns and tanks kind of war. So we will remain steadfast in supporting these aggrieved peoples around the world. So thanks for letting me throw in a couple of words. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your support, Dean Ebert, and for all the work you do in the Hamilton Coalition to Stop the War, which I will say is Hamilton, Ontario, so in Canada. We're gonna start now upgrading folks. If you'd like to turn on your camera and join our group photo and our united chanting for Venezuela against sanctions. But as we do that, you'll get a pop-up on your screen that will say, do you want to rejoin the webinar as a panelist, or something to this effect? If you say yes, you'll be able to turn on your camera and join us here. I want to encourage, of course, people to do that. But as we close, I wanted to check in with our panelists and just see if first, YHAMIR, if you had anything to add, and then Anna. YHAMIR, any final thoughts?
I would say long live the Bolivarian revolution, and hopefully it spreads more with its solidarity, also with the migrant population. You know, we hope to politicize, be patient. You know, I always think about like one time that somebody once said about Bolivar, you know, he was a great leader because he didn't just know how to like lead people who supported him. He also knew how to lead his opposition to unity, and that would be his dream of the Grand Colombia, which, you know, I'm Colombian because of the father Bolivar. But yes, you know, just to be more unified, and you know, and to support Venezuela in these elections coming up in July 26th, which is Commander Chavez's birthday.
July 28th, but yes.
Oh, July 28th, you're right.
Yes,
26 is something else.
It's behind you on the flag, but yes, very true. Okay, and Ana, do you have any final words?
Solo agradecerles
I just wanted to thank you all for the invitation, and I, of course, leave this event very moved and with a lot of energy to continue fighting. And of course, I'm thankful for all your support and solidarity, and also your perseverance. We have to continue fighting together to defeat all these evils, all these wars, interventionism, imperialism, the genocide against Palestine, and the oppression against the peoples of our Americas. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. And so with that, oh, William, of course, if you'd like to say a few closing words too. I think we've gone through the list of everyone that's able to turn on their cameras. If you didn't get an invitation and you'd like to turn on your camera, then please raise your hand or type it in the chat and I'll catch you. I know not everyone is able to, but don't worry if you don't have a sign or anything, just bring your, you know, your fist and your smile. We'll take a few group photos. Okay. Wonderful. Everyone's looking great. Let's see if we caught everyone here.
How I'm looking? How I'm looking?
Oh, we have more than one guest with us here. Wonderful to see you all. Some folks I know are still working on turning on their cameras here. And I will find my sign as well. All right, I'm going to turn off the interpretation system. We'll say a very big thank you to Salome and Julieta, who have made this a bilingual webinar. It is not an easy task. None of us sent our speeches beforehand because we are last minute preparers. So it is not easy. And we couldn't do it without you, Julieta and Salome. So we can go ahead and disable the interpretation and everyone can speak and chant in the same space. And we will unite our voices with a commitment to come back again next month and continue our solidarity between now and then, organizing for Venezuela, learning more about the situation of sanctions, blockade, immigrants and migrants from Venezuela in the US, and also finding out more and sharing information about the delegations coming up to Venezuela. As folks have said, we are in a very critical time. The US attempts to tighten their screws of pressure against the people of Venezuela, increases their intervention in the lead up to the presidential election on July 28th. It is critical that we support Venezuela's sovereignty and independence and stand side by side. So let's chant together. No blockade on Venezuela.
No blockade on Venezuela.
Venezuela, no bloqueo en Venezuela.
No blockade on Venezuela.
No blockade on
Venezuela.
End the sanctions on Venezuela.
End the sanctions on Venezuela.
End the sanctions on Venezuela.
End sanctions on Venezuela.
Hands off Venezuela.
Hands off
Venezuela.
Hands off Venezuela.
Hands off Venezuela.
All
Say
right,
it loud.
Very
Say
good
it
to
loud.
see you
Say it
all.
clear. Migrants are welcome here.
Say it loud.
Loud, say it
Thank
clear.
you.
Migrants are welcome here.
We will be together again. The next picket, if you want to pencil it in, excuse me, is May 28th, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern or Caracas time. See you again. Viva Venezuela.
Viva!
Viva!
Good night.
Viva Venezuela!
Viva la Revolución Bolivariana!
Que viva.
Viva.
¡Viva Chávez!
Que
Viva
viva.
Chávez! Viva Bolívar!
Viva, viva.